of 3,229 and 39 rather of COVID-19 patients have recovered and discharged, with 314 deaths on record so far. As part of guidelines to regulate the reopening of places of worship in the country amid the coronavirus pandemic, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says worshippers must observe personal hygiene protocols and physical distancing, which must be enforced by religious leaders and respective state governments.
We strongly discourage all close contacts, including shaking hands, hugging, kissing, handing out of materials, and sharing of worship implements, including prayer mats, musical organs, microphones, etc. The capacity of the facility should be limited to allow for physical distancing of at least 2 meters between persons.
It is important to bear in mind that this phase, more than lockdown itself, is in the hands of the people more than in the hands of government.
President Muhammadu Buhari is reassuring the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, that Nigeria will stand solidly behind him in his bid to get re-elected for a second term of office. The President gave the reassurance while granting audience to Dr. Adesina on a courtesy visit. Borrowing is one of the components of the national budget, especially in the face of huge fiscal deficit. The impact of the loans are maximized when they are strictly spent on projects earmarked for it. This was the conviction of the Senate as it approved the external loan of $5.5 billion request by the executive.
Conditions of the loans from each lender as are contained in the duly executed loan agreement before that to the National Assembly for proper documentation.
There will be deficit in the 2020 budget, and there will be necessity to take borrowings to be able to bridge the gap.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has approved the federal government's revised 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper with some amendments.
Has no backing of the law.
As leadership, with the Minister of Finance for this yesterday, and I told her this is the clause we're putting into this report. Do we have your commitment that the Port Harcourt-Maiduguri Road must be a part of, or we will not consider any report, any borrowing plan if that is not included? And we got her word.
Subsequent loan will also be committed to the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt-Maiduguri rail line.
Use your good office to make sure that the commitment we got from Ministry of Finance yesterday is carried to the letter.
Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has inaugurated a 7-month tax team on audience measurement that will help position the broadcast industry on a sound revenue generation platform.
We will not see the growth in our television and the value creation in the creative industry that the economy and people of Nigeria so much desire. We need an objective and scientific audience measurement system that articulates the value of the content to consumers as well as the value of the audience to advertisers. The State Community Policing Advisory Committee for the Federal Capital Territory has been inaugurated. FCT Minister Mohammed Musa Bello advised members to be fair and transparent in their discharge of their duties and responsibilities. The committee was constituted by the Inspector General of Police Mohammed Adamu to enhance community policing in the territory.
All upon members of this committee to take this assignment very seriously, because our security depends on you, and we expect that you will give it the utmost attention that it deserves.
The issue of which policing came up to reintroduce, to re-energize everyone.
Those are the news highlights for now. Good morning, Nigeria. On 5 years of Buhari administration, war against insurgency will continue with Kingsley and Kieran after the break. Good morning.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and next for us here now is newspaper review.
Reviewer Baya Tebe is here this morning, and Baya, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Good morning.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay.
All right, we'll begin with the Pilot newspaper. Pilot newspaper from top to bottom. Plot to stop Durban Manson as appeal court president thickens. The story is on page 5. And then gunmen kill pastor wife in Taraba. The full story is on page 5. Now the lead story, rage over rape with 4 riders. Federal government, NAS, IGP condemn rape, murder of female Uniben student and others. Demand stricter punishment for rapists. Insist efforts should be made to curb rape and gender violence as IGP directs for CID to take over investigations. Now, the photo story there in the Pilot newspaper shows a cross-section of suspected kidnappers and armed robbers, popularly known as Sheila Boys, paraded by the police in Adamawa State. Now, below that, it is safer to worship at home, says federal government, details on page 8. And now there are other striking stories here, right at the bottom of the newspaper. House of Reps approves Buhari's 22.7 billion dollars loan. It's on page 6. PDP rejects new pump price, urges federal government to stop fleecing Nigerians. It's on page 5. Court orders Okalu's immediate release from prison. It's also on page 8. Siemens report gives damning verdict on power generation in Nigeria. To get details, you get at page 6 of the Pilot. Now, suspect linked to the rape murder of Uniben student arrested. That's a very good one. It's on page 6. Now, Senate raises crude oil benchmark to $28 per barrel from $25. Details is on page 5. Now, Kinsley.
Okay, we also have the Punch newspaper. Punch the window page right from the top to the bottom, above the nameplate now. MAN and LCCI and others urge CBN and banks to cut interest rates. That's page 27. National Assembly approves Buhari's $5.5 billion budget loan and $22.7 billion facility. That's also on page 27. Tackle poverty, North Amajire Korocha tells Northern governors. FIRS stops scores recruited by Fowler from resuming. Details on page 9. And the lead story is on the revised budget. That's the kicker for it. Says federal government gives National Assembly 27 billion naira for renovation. Cuts health and UBE votes. There are 3 riders to that. It says government slashes primary healthcare centers fund from 44.4 billion naira to 25.5 billion naira. UBE down from 111.7 billion naira to 51.1 billion naira. Federal legislators raise oil benchmark to $28, that's per barrel, and reduce output. Excess crude account illegal, it's according to reps. Now you see a queue of motorcyclists there while they were being screened at a checkpoint at the Nasarawa Abuja boundary. That took place yesterday and Tuesday. OOU produces anti-COVID-19 herb, awaits NAFDAC approval, page 40. We sold our cars for my father's release. That's according to the son of the camp chairman who was kidnapped. That's page 10. Ishaku condemns killing of pastor and wife in Taraba. Obaseki, that's the governor of Edo State, Piman and others mourn Majek Fashek. Details on page 10. 24 female victims accuse student of rape on Twitter. Uniben student, suspect arrested as Inspector General orders case transfer. By your this story on the rape and murder of a Uniben student has been on for a while now.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to start on that human interest story. The police has arrested a suspect. That's the Edo Police Command. They did so when the specialists that went to Edo State were able to identify the fingerprint of the culprit on the fire extinguisher that was used to smash the head of the poor girl. The 22-year-old 100-level student is a microbiology student. In preparation for possible opening of schools, went to a Pentecostal church at Opoba Hill to go and read. And that is where she was raped and killed. But luckily, the Inspector General of Police initially sent specialized forces and investigators to help the Edo State Police Command. There were demonstrations in Benin, Lagos, and even Abuja about it. President Muhammadu Buhari, while condoling the family, also urged the police to fish out the persons concerned. Force Headquarters has now directed that the Deputy Inspector General of Police in charge of criminal investigation, Antonio Obizi, should directly supervise the investigation. And the matter of concern is the sexual abuse that is going across the country. There is a minor who was allegedly assaulted by 14 men in Jigawa State.
Can that be true?
Yes, it was reported. So the police high command now has also deployed specialist investigators to what they describe now as gender desk to take care of such criminal cases as well as juvenile welfare cases.
You know, we're beginning to have rising cases of rape in this country. Now, globally, we used to know South Africa and India, and where we have the highest rape cases in the world. But in Africa, for instance, Nigeria is the key in, and again, the worst part of it all is that minors are involved in this. I don't believe that our law has a provision that can deal with this, because if you give somebody a reasonable jail time, 50 years, life, if possible, then it will stop drastically. But the point is, when a case is reported, there's usually scenarios that are unacceptable, in some cases, because even the persons who are supposed to prosecute such cases don't play the role they're supposed to play.
Generally, there's this stigma that's attached to rape, so victims don't always want to come out. There's this other case too that Kingsley read. You have another serial raper who has been identified as Yangi. A lady took the bold step to come out and confess that she has been a victim. And how does he operate? He befriends the ladies. He's said to be an estate agent, but actually he's a student in a university in Ogun State. He lures them to his home or at a hotel in Port Harcourt where he commits this crime. And one girl has voiced out anonymously, and 23 other girls have come out to confirm that they've been victim of this guy. So what you are saying is true, and is a matter of
in terms of deterrence, Kirian, we have enough provisions in our statute books dealing with this. One of the challenges often had been with diligent prosecution. In the case of Owaila, that's what happened in Benin. It's heartwarming that the Inspector General's office is involved in this, because usually a number of the cases fail on account of poor investigation, because the prosecution can only deal with what it has in the case file, and what is in the case file also arises from what has been investigated and put down on paper. So diligent prosecution is very important, but the prelude to diligent investigation, diligent prosecution is critical investigation, so that the case file is developed, and then you proceed with it without delay. In the case of Owaila, is, if you like, fairly straightforward. It is not just rape, it is murder now. And that's a capital offense. It's an allegation. We do hope that those who have been arrested or alleged to have participated in this are all brought to book. One, the principal suspect apparently has been arrested. Did he act alone or did he act in concert with others? And then you get the process expedited through the judicial system without recourse to undue delays that the case might be forgotten. Before you know it, another case comes up and then we'll forget it. So you dispatch with it. If the justice system finds them guilty, of course, there's no need for any, if they exhaust their rights of appeal, and then they say, look, carry out whatever sentence has been imposed, and if it's supposed to be the business of the governor of a state to ratify such sentences, it should be done without delay.
The other issue is the update in COVID-19. But there's a danger there. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 has read our guidelines that will guide the opening of churches and mosques. But the Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control has also pointed out a danger, and that is the danger that the media, some media outfits are creating an impression that the figures that are reeled out every day about COVID-19 victims are a fraud. And the Director General had to justify that by saying that so far 812 health workers have become victims of COVID-19. Among them are his own staff, 29 of them, who are now currently being treated. And therefore, there is the danger if journalism will now give a lie to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic that is ravaging the world and creating an impression that the daily railing of figures are just a fraud.
Well, it depends on the media outlet that he's talking about, because I know that India, for instance, and other mainstream media may not necessarily do that, because before you put out such a report, you must have carried out some investigation before you can do that. It's not just Nigeria. Globally speaking, the COVID-19 is on the rise and is ravaging many countries. So ours is not going to be different. So for any report, probably on social media, we don't have to pay attention to that. You don't have to pay attention to that. What is important is for them to do their job and ensure that they give Nigerians the accurate number of cases on daily basis. That will help us. So if you don't want to believe it, this is science. So if you don't want to believe it, there you are. The most important thing is that Nigeria is still on the ascendancy when it comes to COVID-19. There are no two ways about it. And again, to take measures that have been put in place to curb that is what is most important at this moment.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with what the point that has been raised. Yesterday we read the story about Majek Fashek, sent down the rain. He passed away yesterday. We had it indeed. That's one of our closing stories on Good Morning Nigeria. Sent down the rain. Majek Fashek. There seemed to have been some initial confusion about his age. If you read some of the online reports, some were saying it was 57, another said it was 71. Majek Fashek would have been 71.
No,
Majek Fashek was 57.
Maybe in the early 60s.
It was 57.
57.
Yeah, 57,
okay.
Yes.
Well, Majek Fashek is referred to as the rainmaker. Somehow, prophetically, whenever he has played that his famous song, Send Down the Rain, there had been rain. There was a big function in Ibadan some time ago, and several artists were there. And usually when they have this function, they let the biggest artist play last. So he came in after Shina Peters had performed. And when he came up with Send Down the Rain, the crowd had to disperse because there was rain. He also sang, so long about Nelson Mandela. Soon after that, his song Nelson Mandela was released in February 1990.
No, I think the man was a philosophical singer. He has a deep talent. I recall his mother saying that he was singing even when he was in the womb. One of the interviews that she contributed, in one of the media a long time ago.
Yeah, many people thought he was not Nigerian because of the name Majek Fashek. Yeah, I know. But actually, the mother is from Benin and his father is from Elisha. And one of his names, I think the Majek is a short call for Majek Kodomi.
That's correct. Okay. That's correct. One of the lessons, I wouldn't know what can be done about this. It's a global phenomenon. Usually very creative persons, say in the musical world, some of them often fall into the habit of self-abuse.
I know.
Self-abuse. I don't know. I just hope that this can be dealt with going forward.
It happens, like you said, it's a global phenomenon. When you make a hit, to become popular, some of them tend to, go into drug abuse and stuff like that. And Majek's issue started when he left Nigeria and resided in New York for a number of years. He returned, not being the same Majek who used
Absolutely.
to know. Yeah. Okay, editorials now. Is on the NIMC, National Identity Management Commission, bio. They said the establishment has made some progress, but there is room for improvement. What are they talking about?
So far, they say they have registered 41 million. And the editorial is saying that with a population of about 200 million, they've just done only a quarter of Nigerians in 13 years, and that is not good enough. So the editorial is happening on the fact that the excuses they are giving, that there are challenges with infrastructure, power, and also enrollment centers, is not acceptable.
I mean power.
Yes,
Power
failure, availability of power across so as to enhance their activities. They say it's not acceptable, and the editorial is recommended that they must have nothing less than 4,000 registration centers, and they should be able to up their acts. Particularly, the editorial is emphasizing that they should learn from the telecom agencies how they are able to capture everybody in the nooks and crannies of this country and register them with their SIM. Therefore, there is room for improvement.
All right, Bayo Ateyebe, thank you very much there for your analysis, and let's try to see you again tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with our topic, 5 years of the Buhari administration and war on insurgency.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, and if you just joined us, we are looking at 5 years of Buhari administration, war against insurgency. And of course, to set the mood for the conversation, here is a report put together by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
A couple of years ago, news of Boko Haram invasion in different local governments, especially in the northeast, became a never-ending nightmare. The situation left many Nigerians living with uncertainty and fear. Not only that, kidnapping and oil bunkering were the order of the day. As of 2015, terrorists in northeastern Nigeria occupied 15 local government areas, killing thousands, with many rendered homeless, others held hostage, followed by destruction of millions of property. Militancy, kidnapping and pipeline vandalism, farmers-herders clashes were as well the order of the day. With President Muhammadu Buhari's assumption of office, he engaged the presidents of Niger, Chad and Cameroon, countries around the regions affected by Boko Haram terrorists. Funds were injected and troops deployed for complete decimation of the insurgents. That prompted the establishment of the multinational task force for the assignments. Also, the president relocated the control and command center of Operation Lafia Dole to the doorstep of the terrorist, Maiduguri, Borno State capital, to enhance close supervision of the counter-insurgency operations. Part of the efforts of the Buhari administration is the acquisition of arms and weapons and local production of military hardware, enhanced local and foreign military training packages. Troops were able to detect and unarm landmines and disarm terrorists despite threats of ambush. Before 2015, markets, schools and roads were always partially or not active due to the fear of invasion by terrorists in Northeast. But with present administration, that became a thing of the past as they were able to resume their normal activities. The Nigerian government saw to the release of some of the kidnapped Chibok and Dapchi schoolgirls and reunited them with their families.
Ina kuka ne saboda farin cikin ganin mahaifiyata saboda ban yi tunanin zan sake ganin ta ba domin gurin da naje ban yi zaton zan dawo ba.
For the consolidation of the successes in the fight against insurgency, series of code-named military operations were set up with specific targets in order to ensure that the average Nigerian can sleep with their two eyes closed and fully secure the Nigerian territory. Now, how has the administration fared in this fight, and what more do they need to do to ensure that insurgency in the country becomes a thing of the past? These are some questions to be answered by guests on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria.
Many thanks to Oyeyemi Ajayi for that background. With us in the studios now to discuss this further, let's welcome Major General Lucky Irabo. He's Chief of Defense Trading and Operations at Defense Headquarters in Abuja. And for a number of years, of course, he was right there in the theater in Maiduguri, and we had him as our guest on Good Morning Nigeria. General Irabo, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria here in Abuja.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Okay. I'm delighted to be here.
All right. Also with us in the studios is Deputy Commissioner of Police, Frank Umba, his Force Public Relations Officer. DCP Francoba, pleasure to have you again on the program.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerians.
Okay.
And seated with us here in Abuja is Kaibiru Adamu. Kaibiru is a security risk management expert. It's good to welcome you this morning, Kaibiru.
Thank you, Kieran. Good morning, Nigerian.
And joining us from our studio in Jos, the Plateau State, is General John Temlong, former President, Alumni Association of National Defense College, and First Commander, Multinational Joint Task Force. He's also a security consultant. It is a pleasure to have you, General.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, gentlemen, once again, our delight to have you join us. Last year marked, unfortunately, the 10th anniversary of the Boko Haram insurgency. Now we are into the 11th year. Well, President Muhammadu Buhari is 5 years in office, and General Irabo, as I indicated earlier, you were right there in the theater of operation, not only just on the Nigerian side, but also with the Multinational Joint Task Force. You're back now at the Defense Headquarters. So, looking back in 5 years, what would you say has changed dramatically in terms of the Nigerian response to the insurgency in the Northeast?
Once again, let me thank you very much, Kingsley, and like to also appreciate Nigerians for tuning in this morning. Yes, looking back the last 5 years, what has changed dramatically, of course, is that the response of not just the military, but the entire Nigerians, that is, being that it's not only the military that fight a war, it's a nation that go to war. The response has been quite swift. The dexterity with which Boko Haram in the past used to attack and destroy villages, that we no longer see. 5 years ago, of course, we saw that a good number of local government areas in the northeast, especially in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states, were being controlled by Boko Haram terrorists. Today, that is no more. We had, of course, Boko Haram launching out long-range attacks to faraway places at some point, even to Abuja here, even though, of course, not within the last 5 years. But, of course, in the past, we have seen such dexterity of the Boko Haram terrorists engaging in such dastardly attacks. That we no longer see. And we equally saw that there were a good number of abductions. Of course, during the background report, it was stated that so many abductions were made by Boko Haram. That we no longer see. Of course, there are quite a lot that we could have done. I must also admit that there are challenges. But by and large, and in summary, is to say that the journey has been so far so good. And I believe that in no distant future, we will be having, or if you like, having a sigh of relief from all issues that have to do with Boko Haram terrorism. But may I also add that it's not just Boko Haram terrorists that we are contending with. In other parts of the country, especially in the northwest, we find all kinds of banditry and criminality that is ongoing. That again we're also addressing along with other security agencies. Within the North Central, we equally see, some form of criminality is also being perpetrated. And of course, in the Niger Delta, you find that even though in the past you find so much of oil theft, that today that has reduced drastically. And I think that we must, commend the efforts of not just the military, but of course other security agencies, and of course the support that the federal government has given to the military and other security agencies in ensuring that we bring these various criminal elements down their knees. So I would say that the last 5 years has been quite significant in the response that we have given to all issues that have to do with criminality.
All right, General Irabo, it's good to really mention that the issue of banditry, other criminalities, just apart from insurgency, because they are organized crimes. Let me take you back a little, because when President Buhari assumed office in 2015, the first thing he did with regards to insurgency was to pay courtesy visits to leaders of neighboring countries, because he, as a general as well, I mean, he thought it necessary to also involve our neighbors, because Boko Haram is operating within these regions. Now, how has that really assisted the Nigerian military in, fighting insurgency in the northeast? Was there any collaboration that you deem may have contributed immensely in ensuring that Boko Haram insurgents were contained?
Well, thank you, Kiran. And that, of course, is very profound, in the sense that Mr. President, had some liaison, of course, extensive liaison with his counterparts from Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. And that boosted, of course, the fight against terrorism and insurgency. As you know, criminal gangs do not operate within geographical frontiers. To them, of course, geographical boundaries are just non-existent. And so prior to 2015, we had so much of cross-border attacks that had impinged on the successes of the war against terrorism and insurgency. But of course, after 2015, given the the engagement of Mr. President, we saw a renewed effort of the Multinational Joint Task Force, which of course now led to greater cooperation amongst the participating countries. And so, and of course, I'm sure you also know that at some stage I was the commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force, wherein we're able to galvanize the resources available to the participating states, namely Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and of course Nigeria, wherein the resources available in terms of personnel and equipment were synergized to make the fight to be worthwhile. And to that extent, we're able to reduce the carnage that Boko Haram had inflicted on the Lake Chad Basin region inhabitants. And of course, you also know that greater trust became very apparent from the engagement that Mr. President had. There was now improved trust to the extent that we could operate across international boundaries. We had, a good number of engagements, across the various international boundaries. So that I must perhaps, say that we have had, so much of advantages coming from our engagement with our neighbors. So Multinational Joint Task Force, I must also commend their inputs. They have helped to reduce, of course, the cross-border attacks that we have found from the Boko Haram terrorists. You also know that the ISWAP, that is Islamic State in West African Province, have also had to, at some stage, move all the way from Libya, Mali, and down to Niger, and they have had some form of inroad into the Lake Chad Basin region. It is because of the galvanized nature of the Multinational Joint Task Force operation that have helped us to be able to address such a challenge. That's the reason why, of course, you do not hear much of them, and what you hear, perhaps, some, very minimal presence that they have, as opposed to the reports that you find in North of Africa.
Thank you very much, General Irabo. Let's go over to our Jos Network studios before we come back to our guys in Abuja. General John Temlong, I mean, it's fairly obvious now, even to non-military experts, that there can be no deadline as to when the war on insurgency would end. But we have seen some remarkable progress in combating the insurgents, indicating, for instance, from what General Irabo has said and what we do know from various accounts. Given your own specialized knowledge of the area, what, in your opinion, has changed, and if so, what has worked in the 5 years that President Buhari has been in office?
Thank you very much, Clinsley. And I think I want to commend General Lucky Labo. He has done me proud because he's one of my products, and he has been. He was up and doing when he was in Maiduguri and later on in N'Djamena. Now, what has actually changed, Kingsley, is that, like he pointed out, is that Boko Haram no more control large spans of territory as they used to have, which well in itself was, they had raised their flags in certain areas that they had taken over as part of their own republic. But be that as it may, I think there is a lot of drawbacks too that we witness. Even though the military has done so well, they have been able to push them out from the territories they hold. And like I said here some years ago on this program, that there is no quick fix to fighting insurgency. So people who are thinking that there must be a deadline that you finish it in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, no. The insurgent, and as it were, and the terrorist himself has the time at his disposal. He strikes you when and where he wants to. It might take years planning just one single operation to strike. And you've seen that what they used to do now, from the fact that they have been denied the territory that they used to hold, they strike and move back. They strike and move back. So it's a guerrilla tactics movement that they do. So in that case, what Nigeria has done and which has improved is to increase the mobility and firepower of our troops. Because in such case, the operation is very fluid and mobile, and you need troops that are mobile and with firepower that can be able to engage them even on the run, or when they strike, you should be able to respond immediately. And so we have the acquisition of more air platforms and then more military hardware for the army. It did help. But what has been the problem so far probably is that there has been too much change of command in that area, because when Lucky was settling down, doing a very great job, he was moved. But I was happy he was moved to N'Djamena. But as he was settling down at the multinational task force to continue again, he was removed and somebody was changed. You don't try to change commanders at that level in this sort of situation, because if somebody is doing good, you don't change a winning team. Allow him to press on. Because it is those winning teams that sometimes somebody will come in and start steadying the whole situation. And you know, these guys are very intelligent. What they do is that they started studying from the commander, this personality, how he operates and what he does. And so they counter him. But when the commander has the initiative and is dealing with them, let him press the fight to the end. Unfortunately, we've had so much change, but I am not in the position to dictate why those changes were. But I believe that we should limit some of those changes and give somebody a task, and if he's performing well, praise him and let him go on and finish it up. But where he is not performing well, remove him, because we have had instances where we have seen complete dereliction on the part of commanders there. And I believe that such commanders were removed. When they were removed, it was good for a purpose. But when somebody is doing very well, you keep him there and allow him to finish the task. So what we are doing now, we need to press on more. What the insurgents don't like is don't allow them freedom of action at all. Because if you allow them freedom of action, they will go and recruit. They will build back, and then they'll have strength and hide and fight back. But if you start fighting them and you have the initiative, press on the fight until they surrender. I think that's what is done all over, and that's what I did too when I was there. So you just don't allow them any breathing space. Don't allow them time and loss to regain the initiative. Press on the fight, hit them hard, and deal with them, and you rout them out. I think that's what we should do now, because but see, when you start having a lull, sometimes then you see them rebuild. When we said we had decimated them to the extent that they didn't have enough strength, yes, they went back and rebuilt. Came back stronger, hitting targets here, went to Dapchi and got all the girls there and the rest. So I think what we need to do now, and which we have been doing, and I think we need to do more, is to press and do not allow them freedom of action. Once you don't allow them freedom of action and you press on the fight, you rout them. I believe we should do that. What they are trying to do now is what they are doing. And if they do it and continue with that, we should be able to put this thing at our back. But most importantly is to get the civilian population to accept with the narrative that this is a fight against the insurgents, not against our own boys. Because the narrative had been that these are our boys. And so once the people cooperate with you, the citizens cooperate, and give you sufficient intelligence, because this is an intelligence-based operation. Once you have credible intelligence and you start hitting them continuously, the ending that situation will not be a matter of months, but a matter of days. So I want to commend the military for having tried their best despite the difficult situations they found themselves, and able to roll back the situation to the extent that they don't hold territory again, but they are in the fringes. I think it's something good. We should commend them, but they can do more and achieve more so that we can put this behind us. But I like he mentioned about the bandits too. I think the strategy right from day one should have been that, because we should have planned to operate in more than one front. Because when Mr. President came and said, move the military command headquarters to Maiduguri, I said it here on this Good Morning Nigeria. I say, supposing the Niger Delta came up again, are you going to split the headquarters? Because people are saying that all the service headquarters should move to Maiduguri. I said, no, we don't fight wars like that. Wars are fought by commanders like Erabo, who are there in that place because they have given him the task he should fight. The service headquarters do not fight the wars. They are supposed to support them and give them all the necessary equipment and men and material that they need to fight that war, because that is their task. He is the commander of the force at that place. And so when you say move the service headquarters there, and then Niger Delta starts, why are you going to split the headquarters into two? Now you have the Northwest, you have the Niger Delta, you have kidnapping going on here and there. So it's not like that. During the Second World War, George Marshall never left Washington, D.C. and relocated to England or to France. No. Eisenhower was the one commanding the general operations there, and General Patton, Bradley, and the rest had their troops, and they were fighting in their own areas, operational areas. So I think what Nigerians were pressing for, that, look, let the service chiefs go and remain where they are. They should fight there. The CDA should move. All the service chiefs should move and relocate the headquarters. Which headquarters are they going to fight with? The headquarters is supposed to be, they are supposed to command the Nigerian Army, for goodness sake. The Nigerian Army spans the whole country. The Air Force, the whole country. The Navy, where they are located. The Chief of the Staff coordinates the whole defense forces. So I think Nigerians too must understand that military operations are fought by military commanders who are given assigned tasks with assigned troops and resources to carry out those tasks and then bring them to a conclusion. I think I'll stop here for the moment. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, and thank you also for the points you have raised. I think that, what happened, when the president said the headquarters should move, was actually at a point when Boko Haram was like on top of it all, and it appeared as if perhaps we don't have the military. He was touched, as a general himself, to say, look, move closer to the place. Because this is the first time, if I'm right, that we are experiencing a asymmetric kind of war. This is not a normal war. It's a war of what people I would describe as ragtag, but then they're also properly coordinated and they have equipment that they're using, to do the fight. But what is good that he also said is that it's now a frontal thing. Move in, take the war into them. Don't allow them to, to regroup and stuff. Go in there, fight them, and let's see how they can withstand an army such as Nigerians. Now, let's come back to Abuja and to DCP Frankenberg. DCP Frankenberg, when Boko Haram issue started, the police, Nigerians, even the authority then, believed that it's a police matter, that the police can take care of it. Until a certain time when Boko Haram grew, to a point where the police could not handle the matter alone. We would like you to give us an idea of the contribution of the police in this insurgency war, perhaps in the last 5 years. But before you do that, during our week newspaper review this morning, Kingsley and I and Bayo, we are so particular about the issue of the rape of the student in Benin who was raped and murdered as well. And of course, the IGP has given directive that higher level police authorities should investigate that. Just give us an idea of what the situation is at the moment before you answer the major question.
Okay, once again, thank you for having me. And the case of the rape that actually led to the death of Uwa, for me, is a very pathetic one. And it is a scenario or is an incident where that all well-meaning Nigerians or even citizens, global citizens, will condemn and condemn in the strongest terms. Investigations are ongoing, and I want to very strongly assure Nigerians that we will do everything humanly and operationally possible to make sure that we arrest the perpetrators of that particular offenses, because there's a situation where you have rape and then you also have death arising as a result of the unlawful force unleashed on the young woman. We'll make sure we bring them to book. But I also start with general listening to your newspaper analysis, and I needed to use this opportunity you just gave me to tell Nigerians that, look, the reason why a lot of rape cases fail is not always as a result of failure in investigation. There are 3 key reasons, and we need to understand this so that we're not praying for rape incidents to be happening, but when they happen, we'll be able to manage those scenarios and make the job of the investigators and eventually the job of the prosecutors easier. Number 1 is the failure of most persons to report rape incidents timelessly. Kingsley, the truth is, even though legally speaking, rape cases like other criminal cases are not statute bar, but the truth is, the earlier you report them, the better for the investigators, because the longer the time between the incident and the time of reporting, the lesser the chances of actually retrieving evidence from the crime scene. That's number 1. Number 2 is the mismanagement of the crime scene. And this happens oftentimes mistakenly or unintentionally, because citizens are not aware that these are important things that could actually help in bringing the perpetrator to justice. And in rape cases, there are 2 crime scenes: the actual physical scene where the incident takes place, and actually the body of the woman that was defiled, or the body of the woman that was sexually assaulted. That particular body is a living crime scene, is a mobile crime scene, and you need to manage that particular crime scene, that moving mobile crime scene very well. And that's why in this platform I want to advise on how to manage that. 1, if an incident of rape takes place, first of all, make sure you preserve the purity of the crime scene. Don't touch anything. Don't move the beds. Don't change the beddings. Don't even flush the toilets. Leave everything there the way you made them. Sometimes, if we come in and we look at the situation in its purest state, pristine state, we're able to better reconstruct the crime scene. Secondly, if it is a date rape, a rape where probably a drug facilitated or a drug induced rape, you find out that just that bottle of Coke that is halfway down, that bottle of Fanta, that can or that pack or empty pack of fruit juice, or that glass of wine that is halfway down could actually be the answer we're looking for. And if it is a drug-induced rape, we also advise that beyond the usual advice: don't take your bath, don't douche, don't change your dress, don't remove any of your clothing. One most important thing that the woman must not do is she should not even urinate, except it becomes absolutely necessary to keep her alive. Otherwise, the urine should be collected at the nearest hospital, because the urine could actually be the answer to determining the type of drug that was used in lacing her drink, lacing any of the things she took. So these two things, if we can manage them very well, the job of the investigator become easier. If you bring the best investigator, when a rape is being reported, let's say for example 2 months down the line, or you come into the crime scene, the beddings have been changed, they've been washed, the clothes has been washed, the victim has taken her bath, every single trace or strand of evidence has been destroyed. The best investigator in the world will struggle. And then not to talk of interference by relatives. That's one of the things we're dealing with, but we'll find a way of dealing with them now. You find out that this is the only country where you are closing up on a rape case, and the relatives will be coming, not just the relatives of the suspect, but the relatives of the victim will be coming to obstruct the police, and sometimes advising the victim to become a hostile witness and making your job very difficult. So I think we must all work together. Beyond keeping a watchful eyes on our wards, on our children, particularly during this lockdown, we must also, when it happens, try to do the right thing so that our job can be easier.
Yeah, Franco, but thank you very much for that perspective.
No, but he didn't continue.
Yeah, he still has the other question to take. But I mean, our viewers will appreciate the reason why we have had to do this, because during our newspaper review, as Kirian indicated, we had talked about it. And anyone who has apprehended the story of what happened to Uwaila in Benin, of course, has been horrified by what transpired. But the advisory that Franco Ba has given is very useful. Probably we'll have the opportunity of replaying this from time to time so that victims and relatives of victims would know what proper steps to take, and then aid investigation and then diligent prosecution of those cases.
Now to the business of the day. Yeah. Okay, like you rightly noted, at the beginning of the insurgency, of course, it started as a low-level security challenge, and that's a trend worldwide, and that's why we always say very proudly that the police is usually the first line of defense and also the last line of defense. The reason is because even if it's going to be a war, except in rare cases where war is declared from the very beginning, most civil wars start as protest, riot, and so the police are deployed. And then they begin to contend with those challenges. And as they begin to get overwhelmed, the military come in and the military most likely take over. Why are they called the last line? As the military begin to wage the war, territories that are conquered are handed over to the police authorities to work with the civil authorities to restore order and then hold those territory while the military continue with the onslaught. And of course, even as the onslaught goes on, depending on the nature and the dynamics of the war, you also find sometimes the police some components of the police being embedded in the actual fight. And so that's how it works. And so that was the same scenario that played out here. I started out as a civil unrest and low-level security issues. And then when it became a massive one, the military came in, and it has remained that way. But again, the general will also has said it repeatedly that wars are not fought just by the military alone. The wars are waged by the people, the government, the nation, of course, with its military in the forefront. And that's exactly what has happened. What roles have we played? And how has the presidency of Muhammad Buhari impacted on how we have been able to play our roles. We have continued to play supportive roles to the military. We've also have elements of the Nigerian police force, particularly the counter-terrorism units and the PMF personnel embedded in some of the front lines. And the intelligence component of the police is also doing a whole lot, just as the intelligence component, of course, of the Department of State, the DSS, are also doing a lot in providing those information, those pieces of intelligence that will aid military strikes and successful strikes at that matter. And then, how has the presidency of Muhammad Buhari impacted on the war against insurgency? I will say it has been very profound. And I will be speaking mostly from a police-centric perspective. For us, one of the major things we have enjoyed under his watch, particularly since the coming into office of IGP Mohammed Abubakar Damo, has been the massive improvement in our logistics. In one swoop, for instance, the president was at the force headquarters where he commissioned about 139 patrol vehicles. Most of them were smart vehicles with cameras that has long-range capacity to pick up incidents and report directly to the National Command and Control Center, also domiciled at force headquarters, which was incidentally also commissioned on that very day. On that very day, he also commissioned the National Crime and Incident Data Center, also based in headquarters in the force headquarters there. And then he commissioned a lot of armored personnel carriers, tactical vehicles, as well as troop carriers. When he was even doing the commissioning, one of the items or one of the operational vehicles he commissioned were the anti-riot anti-riot water cannons. The beauty of that is that today those water cannons are being used to disinfect our cities as part of COVID-19 prevention efforts. So you find that when some of these items are being procured, people don't even understand that beyond their operational use, they can also be customized to perform other roles. So we have seen a lot of improvement in the areas of logistics. We've seen a lot of improvement in our capacity to gather intelligence, and that again explains why today the intelligence unit of the Nigerian Police Force has become fully autonomous. And what we have now is a full-fledged intelligence department, the Force Intelligence Bureau, headed by a Deputy Inspector General of Police. And for us, these are major achievements in our efforts to strengthen our capacity, strengthen our training, and strengthen our response time. And again, part of the improvement we've also seen is in the area of interagency cooperation. We've seen a lot of massive successful operations that were carried out with the police working together with core components of the military, particularly the Air Force. And some of this interagency collaboration have also helped in advancing our cause against our common enemies. But one thing we must not gloss over is the fact that under the presidency of Muhammad Buhari, we've also seen the use of international diplomacy in fighting this war at a very intense level. The president understanding the linkage between climate change, desertification, and some of the security challenges we are having, such as farmers' herders clash, for instance, has become a champion in revitalizing the Lake Chad Basin. He has become not just a national champion in pushing that cause, he has been mobilizing both regional, continental, and global efforts at making sure the the Chad Basin gets back to life, and use that also as a soft approach in fighting the war against insurgency and banditry.
All right, thank you very much, DCP Frank Mba. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Dr. Kabiru Adabu, one of our usual analysts on security matters, of course, has been listening to all the issues that the guests have raised. Dr. Kabiru Adabu, yourself, you also spent quite some time in the course of your work in Maiduguri and other locations where the insurgents have been battled. Give us a sense of what, in your opinion, has changed and why in 5 years.
Thank you, Kingsley, and thank you for, well, honoring me as the only non-uniformed or civilian guest that you have this morning. So my approach is likely to be slightly different from what the other guests have mentioned. I'll start by taking us back to the National Counterterrorism Strategy, which is more or less the roadmap that the country is using to implement our counter-terrorism approach. And in that, there are two major components: the kinetic component, which the three other guests have spoken extensively about, and then, of course, the soft approach, which to an extent the last speaker, DCP Frank Mba, has touched upon a bit. The objective of the National Counterterrorism Strategy has been to, firstly, contain the insurgency, and then, more importantly, to tackle the core issues that led to the rise of the insurgency. Now, to this extent, the administration of President Buhari, which is in its five years now, has done remarkably well in terms of, firstly, propelling us back to that counterterrorism strategy. That document, as it were, is the custodian of that document is the Office of the National Security Advisor. I would, with your permission, mention some figures a bit, just to put what I'm saying in perspective. Now, these figures, I must note that they may not be 100% correct, because I am going to quote them from my own consultancy, and I'm not claiming to have 100% accuracy in terms of what I've been able to gather. But I have tried to cross-reference them with other remarkable and well-established sources, both local and international. So let's take us back to 2013 and 2014, before the President Buhari administration, when unfortunately Nigeria won the infamous acclaim as the terrorism capital of the world, and 7,000 Nigerians lost their life in 1 year alone. Now, consistently from 2015 up until this year that we're in, well, the figure for this year is still building, but the total number of deaths from insurgency from 2015 up to 2019 has ranged between 1,200 to 1,400. So a remarkable drop from the 7,000 figure that I've mentioned. And I mean, even a blind or a school pupil at primary one would know that's progress. The reasons for the progress have been mentioned by the other speakers. Where I would come in is, how do we tie in all of this progress into the National Counterterrorism Strategy to ensure sustainability? That's what worries me a bit. The National Counterterrorism Strategy looks at all the security agencies working together as one. And I know President Buhari has sometimes, to an extent, even in frustration, instructed certain things, such as the establishment of the Intelligence Fusion Center, where he said one should be in Abuja and the other one in Maiduguri. Now, we know they are operational, but how effective have they been? I mentioned in the course of my contribution the issue of winning the hearts and minds of the people. So what is the relationship between what the federal government is doing and what the state governments, especially in Borno State, which is the epicenter of the insurgency? The present governor of Borno State has done remarkably well in what I would call state-level initiatives to support the federal government initiatives and help in winning the hearts and minds of the local population so that they can support the counter-terrorism operation. Now, all of this have resulted in remarkable progress, but the only way these things can be sustained is if we use that roadmap, that national counter-terrorism strategy, so that all these agencies are working together, both the federal government and, of course, the state government. Then we also need to bring in the role of the legislature, as it were, how the supportive role of the legislature in all of this, how they have looked into the national counterterrorism strategy, provided approval for the various funding that the government at the federal level has gone to them for approval for, and then of course the role of specific individuals who are from that region and who have tried to look beyond their federal role, as it were, and to come up with initiatives to support all of that. So in a nutshell, I think when you look at the national counterterrorism strategy and the role played by President Buhari, I think there has been remarkable progress. Is it hurried? Unfortunately, no. The current state, as it were, in the northeast is one where we're seeing a cat and mouse game. I'll take us back to sometime around August 2019, when the theater command in the northeast came up with this super camp strategy. Before then, there were a lot of forward operating bases that were being taken over by the terrorist groups, and so the super camps were initiated that are stronger and bigger, and were able to withstand the attacks. And we've seen a reduction in that type of attack against forward operating bases. But what has happened that unfortunately it has opened some populations, it has made them a bit more vulnerable. But in the last few months, say 3 months back, I think especially since the Chief of Air Staff relocated back to the northeast, we've seen remarkable types of operations and attacks that are targeting the bases of especially the Islamic State in West Africa province. That is where it's called the Timbuktu Triangle, very close to the Lake Chad Basin. Then, of course, there are bases in the Sambisa Forest, in Alagano Forest. There are several operations that are targeting those bases, and it has really dislodged the two major terrorist groups. And so we're seeing different types of attacks now, what we will call unofficial vehicle checkpoints, where the insurgents will block the road for a couple of sometimes hours or minutes, carry out attacks, and then go back into the forest. And because they're in smaller groups, like I said, they've been dispersed, it's a bit more difficult to deal with them. So like one or two of the speakers before me have mentioned, these groups are able to transform. And of course, security agencies are also monitoring the situation and then coming up with new measures. But what is important in all of this is that phrase that I use, winning the hearts and minds of the local population, and only a coordinated action between the federal government, the state government, and then of course all the other arms of government will help in achieving that.
All right. Thank you indeed for that well-researched contribution. We are still here in our studio, and I'd like to go to Major General Loke Rabo once more. General Rabo, when the insurgency broke out in 2009, what became the major issue for the Nigerian military was, what do they have in the arsenal? As a matter of fact, the government of the day at that time had nothing to offer in terms of equipment for the military. And of course, we were made caricature of the country, when we were told that, we are looking for equipment here and there, as if you can buy them off the shelf. But that wasn't possible. But one of the major improvements that we had in recent past is the fact that the military has been properly, it's re-equipped. But I can recall the then governor of Borno State did say once that, look, that it does appear that Boko Haram had more sophisticated equipment than what the Nigerian army had as at that time. Right now, some of us who were interested, in studying wars across the globe, especially asymmetric wars like that of Afghanistan and elsewhere in the globe, know about major fighting equipment, good tanks, F-16, what we want to call Tomahawk, even amphibious attacks and what have you. Now, what has happened in recent past in terms of equipping the military?
Thank you very much, Kieran. Truly, you're right that at some stage of the war, we have had challenges. Currently, we still have challenges, no doubt, but of course, challenges are not how they used to be. Talking about the equipment disposition of the armed forces, there's history to it too. Do not forget that at some stage of our political history as a nation, the military was at the helm of political leadership of the country. And so at the time, there were coups and counter-coups. There were issues of, if you like, state security, and sometimes regime security. These, when you aggregate them, had some form of impact on the military, whether training or equipment. And so over the years, we had a few issues. And of course, in 1999, 1999, before the democratic dispensation, there were issues. And then when, of course, when democracy came and there was civilian leadership, it became very obvious that something has to be done with respect to military incursion into political leadership. And so at that time, attention shifted from, the military to the civilian administration. They needed to settle. There are other areas of our political life that have suffered. So at that time, of course, we didn't have the kind of security challenge that we now have. So it was then the intention of the administration at the time to begin to look at other areas that have suffered neglect following long years of military rule. Even though, of course, people like Dr. Kabiru, when they begin to analyze it, you find that there are other factors beyond what I've just stated. Now, that at some stage we began to have issues, and you recall that at one time, Chief of Army Staff had to, make open statements, talking about the neglect that was now beginning to creep into the military, if you recall, back in 2000. And so again, you see, the military is not equipped, is not only equipped during war. Military, you fight with what you have been trained with. So if you suffer training during peacetime, if you suffer equipment and provision, proper provision during peacetime, it's going to be made manifest during wartime. And so this was the situation we found ourselves, that even though, of course, during military rule too, of course, we have suffered, a lack of appropriate training, then, of course, that continued until the time which we are now talking about. So when we were now challenged, it became apparent that, of course, that there were gaps that needed to be filled. And so the reassessment, continued, and eventually we were able to pull through. And the equipping, of the military, is a continuous process. I must say that, of course, given the current administration, a lot has been done. But are we there yet? No. I believe that there are issues of resources. The resources are not only to be channeled to military provisioning, but I usually say that for there are three tripods upon which a nation rests, and amongst these three tripods, security is very profound. Of course, we have also had arguments of development security conundrum, wherein you want to think of which one should come first, security first or development. Again, these are things that, depending on the forum that you are arguing, of course, even the facts that you have at your disposal, you'll be able to state categorically what it is. I believe that going forward, that we must understand that when you win victory, it's not enough to win the victory. Victory has to be sustained. And in sustaining the victory, in sustaining successes, a lot has to be done in the sense that you must continue to look ahead, because your adversaries, certainly, they are not going to go to sleep. They also go to reevaluate whatever has made them to fail. And then for you to be able to sustain the victory that you have won, whatever has enabled you to win the victory also must be sustained. In this case, training, evaluation must continue. You intensify your training also must continue. the equipping must also continue. Don't forget that in war environment, there are casualties. As you have human casualties, you equally have equipment casualties. Equipment that you buy today could fall casualty tomorrow. It could become such an unserviceable equipment that you need to replace. And you also know that military hardwares are not easy to come by. They are expensive. And so when you now aggregate the other challenges, the requirements to be able to keep other sectors of the economy running, then of course you know that it's a humongous tax for any administration. But of course it's for everyone to understand the underpinnings and to be able to know what to do at any point in time, what to give priority to, and so on and so forth. So I believe that these and many more are what you may wish to do some further studies to understand that war does not come cheap, victory does not come cheap, sustaining victory, or if you like, maintaining victory does not come cheap.
All right, General Irabo, well, thank you very much for your response, and indeed the other guests, we appreciate you still being with us out there. It's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the program. All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. Now, just before we bring in the other guests, General Irabo, that's a point that has been made on this program, and we've heard it also repeatedly, that the people must own the war, and their contribution is usually very helpful. There appears to be in the Nigerian public space sometimes some confusion as to what happens when the Nigerian military is taking on Boko Haram insurgents. One of the clearest examples would be, you hear of reports, for instance, in our neighboring countries, Niger, they get Boko Haram terrorists, and the next thing you hear is that they have been tried and probably summarily executed. And here we are, we have a de-radicalization program, and then you say you release those who have been de-radicalized and then reintegrate them into society. How helpful is this, towards assuaging the people that indeed, this is a war that is intended to, in their own imagination, decimate and, get rid of these terrorist elements that have made life very difficult for them?
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. The issue of de-radicalization and eventual release, training and eventual release to communities is a very touchy one, in the sense that those who have been involved in these senseless killings and criminalities, they are fellow citizens. Now, a good number of them who have passed through our DDR camp are those who surrendered. Now, we have a code of ethics that once an adversary, I don't want to use the word enemy, surrenders, you have a moral duty to keep him alive and take him to the camp. In this case, these are Nigerians who have also gone through the DDR process, where they have been de-radicalized. Now, after the process, where should they be? Are we going to allow them to remain in the camps? Yes, of course, on the part of those who have been victims, all right, the families of the victims that this individual have had to inflict on them, it's understandable when they feel that, look, they feel so repugnant about his return to the community. But again, these are all part of the processes of social engineering that we need to do, social orientation that we must do, carry out. Of course, it's not a military job, but it's all for us to begin to call on our citizens for them to begin to understand the peculiar nature of this issue, wherein that anyone who has surrendered and has gone through the mandatory training of process of de-radicalization, of course, it behooves on us to have him released back to his community, and then so that he can be properly reintegrated into the society. I believe that when they are given proper tools, and then the various communities are sensitized, and also we have a way of monitoring their post radicalization behavior. Then we'll be able to holistically solve this problem. But to think that what we're doing currently is not right, that in my view will be inappropriate. What perhaps I may want to also encourage is that for those that have been found guilty, our judicial process needs to be hastened so that those that need to be punished are punished appropriately. And then, of course, punishment, when they are properly disseminated, that is published, then, of course, the public will be able to have greater confidence as to what has been done to those who have inflicted some form of pain and anguish on them. So I want to join to encourage the populace to please understand that anyone, of course, they are, if you like, they are still our brothers and sisters who have at some point been deranged. They went astray. But now they've been able to come to their senses, and they feel that they need to surrender to our own forces, and we have put them through the de-radicalization process. There are some training that we're giving to them. They need to leave the camp and return back to communities. And I think it's essential for us to begin to work out how best we can have them properly integrated. But to say we shouldn't do that, that might be another challenge which might not be good enough for us.
Yes, in a war situation, when you surrender, I mean, it means that you have given up. About what is good about what the military is doing is to see how we can to re-engineer or socially re-engineer them in terms of thinking, in terms of reasoning, because like you said, most of them were hoodwinked, most of them were even charmed, most of them were, forced actually, to be part of Boko Haram and so on. So it's a good development, as you have pointed out. Now let's go back to JALS, where we have General John Temlonga, former president of Alumni Association of National Defense College. So you have listened to General Irabo and other speakers. And I still want us to talk about the issue of training and equipping the military, because I'm so concerned about this equipment thing, because talk about the U.S., one of the major nations across the globe, in their budgeting, defense is number one, followed by science and technology, because science and tech, of course, drives defense. When you talk about defense, talk about equipment, and of course, the training of the men and women who are usually in the war theater. Now, looking at what has happened in the past 5 years with respect to equipment, you have been in the military, and of course you know that we lagged behind, as Jerry Rabot pointed out in the past, in terms of equipment. Are you satisfied with what has been done now in terms of equipment? If not, what can be done, especially looking inwards to see whether we can even begin to produce our own equipment here? I was privileged to be in one of the Asian countries, Indonesia to be precise, where we were taken to a war manufacturing factory owned by the military. In fact, even the Air Force, owned by the nation's Air Force, manufacturing their own helicopters, manufacturing their own guns, and what have you. Is that a possibility in Nigeria going forward?
Thank you very much, Kirian. I think it is the crux of the matter, because fortunately I was one of the members that reviewed the National Defense Policy. And we had to travel to Innocence Motor in Newi. We got this man in Ogun State who manufactures armored vehicles. And we brought them to Abuja. We went to Newi itself and explored the possibilities of Innocent Motors producing vehicles for the military and other security forces. We went to Enugu to the Mercedes plant and the rest. We looked at other capacity that Nigeria had inbuilt already that could be utilized, used as a foundation for building on our defense industrial complex. We found out that we have that capacity if the government can seriously look into it. And in the policy, it was agreed that a military industrial complex that will spearhead the production of military equipment for the armed forces and other security forces including using the spare capacities for civilian use. If you know, the Americans do extend that spare capacity too. So unfortunately, the defense policy has not been fully implemented. The president has approved it. He approved it in 2017. I think we need to do more in terms of local production, because what you are saying that we saw in during the Jonathan administration, when America clamped a lot of sanctions on us, some of our boats were held up in Pakistan because we couldn't fly them in. There was no flying right to get them into the country. Even to buy equipment, no. Even look at now, we paid for equipment cash down, and they were supposed to be delivered when from America. They have not delivered it. So definitely there can be no option to homegrown manufacture of most of our equipment. It has exposed America to even the war against COVID, where simple things like face masks, PPEs, and the rest were not available in their numbers. Britain had to import masks from Turkey and the rest. So it shows that you definitely need to manufacture some of your critical needs in your country. And to go to what the government has done, they are doing what they can for now, at least for the equipping of the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy. You've seen that there are new platforms that have been introduced. But you see, the unfortunate thing is that when you introduce a new equipment into war directly, Rabo mentioned it, the operator. General Patton said it's not the equipment, but it's the person behind the equipment. And if a soldier or an airman is not conversant with the equipment that you are giving him, no matter how good that equipment is, if he cannot operate it properly, it will not give it the desired result. So definitely we need to use peacetime period to continue to build our armed forces and train the personnel, because training in the armed forces is what you cannot compromise, because it's second to none. We have it on record that you said if you sweat more in peacetime, you bleed less in war. But if you don't sweat in peacetime, you bleed more in war. That means if you sweat more, it means you are training. Unfortunately, you have to train on the equipment you are going to use. I had asked my boss one day when he visited as a chief army staff, and he said we should improvise to train. Then I asked him, I said, "Sir, how do you improvise petroleum, oil, and lubricants?" And he looked at me and said, "Hakika." Because if you say you will train, yes, we'll tell the men, this is the engine, this is the transmission, and this is the gun, this is the recoil system, and the rest. And he cannot drive it out to feel it because you don't have the petroleum, oils, and lubricants to move those equipment. That improvisation will not work. And so what they need is that the equipment they are going to be used will be introduced to them in peacetime. But as it were, we have found ourselves in war. Definitely you do that. And what they do is that you bring back the men a little bit, train them on the equipment, and then launch them into battle. So I think the important thing is that the government is doing its work. But most importantly, I think the National Assembly is not working properly to make sure that the military is equipped. It is the dual role of the executive and the legislature to make sure that we have an army or an armed forces that is well equipped, well trained, and well maintained and well motivated. It's not just the work of the executive. No. I have not seen how many of them going on operational visits to go right down to the front lines and ask certain questions from the commanders and the troops. Are the equipment you are using the right equipment? Do you have them in quantity? Are you short of supplies and the rest? And that's when they come back and start legislative processes. It's not just for the executive to start doing those things. No. You see American congressmen going right down to the front line with troops, asking questions, calling the commanders back to the Congress, to the Capitol, and asking them pertinent questions. What are your tasks, your strategies? Do you have equipment ready to go? Do you have the capacity and capabilities to launch into operation and the rest? If you don't have, what are your requirements? And they build in those requirements and make sure that they are provided. And they hold the executive to it that they must provide it, because once it's budgeted, they must insist the executive provides those things. So the National Assembly have had a very lukewarm attitude towards our armed forces. And while people have been saying that because it is an arm that was not there during the military, so there had been lack of continuity on that side. But for 21 years, for goodness sake, we don't know. Unfortunately, what we do is that every year the high turnover in the National Assembly is not encouraged because there is no continuity. At a time, you only have about 23 or so coming back to the Senate. I think that's wrong. We recommended at the National Confab that we should have midterm elections to take care of some of this lack of continuity that we have in the National Assembly. Because when you talk of ranking members, they are always in the security, the armed forces, and the judiciary committees, so that they already know what they are doing, and they've been there for 10, 15, 20 years. Unfortunately, we don't have that here. So we need to do that.
Yeah, Gerard Temlong, thank you very much. We will, of course, continue with the conversation. Just coming back to the Abuja studios. Dr. Kabir Adamu, now, apart from the kinetic segment of the war against insurgency, we also heard a lot about countering violent extremism. How well has that proceeded in 5 years in your assessment?
In summary, the Buhari administration has done remarkably well in that area. The Office of the National Security Advisor launched the countering violent extremism framework. I think this was in 2018, I can't remember exactly, and then that framework translated into a lot of things. One of them, of course, is the creation of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and the third component, which has subsumed issues like the Victim Support Fund, the Northeast Development Initiative, and several other aspects. Now, all of this, the listener may ask, why is this important in a counter-insurgency operation? The terrorist recruit usually using factors like economic deprivation, governance, development issues that was mentioned by General Irabo. Now, how do you reduce their ability to recruit? It is through this soft approach, this countering violent extremism. And the moment you reduce their ability to recruit, then frankly, the war is coming to an end. And I think that is where we need to commend the Buhari administration for looking closely at this soft approach to terrorism and, of course, dedicating more funds to the implementation of the countering violent extremism approach. I would like to call on the administration to do more, especially in terms of getting the buy-in of the state governments. The Borno state governor, especially the current one, has been remarkable. He needs a lot of commendation in terms of the effort he has done in this particular field of countering violent extremism. I keep on emphasizing this phrase, winning the hearts and minds of the people. It is not through kinetic approach that we've been talking about that you win the hearts and minds of the people. It's through this countering violent extremism, and the Buhari administration is doing very well. There is a component of that approach that more needs to be done, and frankly is in the realm of the Ministry of Information, the National Orientation Agency. That is strategic communication. We need to do more of that. We need to speak more to the people. They need to understand what the government is doing so that they can support it more.
All right, thank you. And now to DCP Frank Mba. I recall, if we could, the Metasine saga those days, but they were handled by the police. And we want to believe that we still have such astute and well-trained police personnel in this country. Now, talking about equipping the police, you talked about it a short while ago, and we also want to match it with the training of the personnel that man this equipment. How has the police fared, in the last 5 years in terms of equipment and training, and of course plans for inward looking in terms of local manufacture of equipment?
I will say we've also had remarkable improvement. But just like other speakers have noted, although we are way out of the desert, we are not yet in the promised land yet. For us, we have seen massive improvement in our logistic and infrastructural base, both directly from the funding and the provision of the federal government, as well as from the support and provisions of the state governments. To be very fair and honest to them, a lot of the state governments have been able to support the police in very creative ways to actually improve their operational basis and assets. The state governments like those in Lagos, Ogun State, Anambra State, Katsina, Yobe have done excellently well in swelling the operational capacity of the police. And also, one thing that we also must give credit to this current administration is the eventual coming into life of the Police Trust Fund. The Police Trust Fund, which is a replica of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, but perhaps in a broader perspective and broader definition, is designed as a stopgap mechanism for dealing with the budgeting deficit of the Nigerian police force. And now that body has been properly brought to birth, and its membership has been properly constituted, and of course with a very strong Ministry of Police Affairs driving the Police Trust Fund, of course with the likes of the current Inspector General of Police, who also is a very tested and trusted hand. You can be sure that we'll be able to deal with some of these budgeting issues, logistics issues, training issues, and the likes of them moving forward.
All right, thank you very much. This will be Franco Bab. General Rabo, let's get this from you very briefly too. Could we do with more cooperation and collaboration from our neighbors?
Well, thank you very much. Cooperation is very essential. Maybe what to ask is, are we receiving sufficient cooperation? Can it be better? I would say yes, we are receiving a whole lot of cooperation, and of course we can still improve on it. But what I can tell you is that we have never had it this good, and I believe that the trust and confidence reposed in our president by these other neighbors is very profound, and I believe we're going to build on it. We leverage that cooperation to do better.
Yeah, I think that question was actually apt, because you recall some weeks ago, the Chadian army, came rampaging, claiming that they've dealt with the Boko Haram, and many Nigerians were saying, look, where is the Nigerian army? And so on. But after a while, the Nigerian army explained the situation, and everybody came to understand it's all part of efforts by the region to root out Boko Haram. Now, we have tools there.
That's right, Kira. Let's go over them very quickly. Bola Babs, one of our regulars. It's not over until it's over. The war may not have been won completely, but we definitely aren't where we used to be. There's where that even the seat of power could hardly sleep with the two eyes closed. There's where we had blockage everywhere, but not anymore.
Mike, war against insurgency is always a protracted one, since it is different from the known conventional ones. Your enemies are ubiquitous and within. This administration decisively is doing the best to fight in the war to the finish.
Now, Franco Baresi, the way the war is being fought is highly commendable.
Okay, now, Mutana Farouk, war against insurgency is one of the three cardinal agenda of President Buhari's administration. Under his administration, Boko Haram has been degraded to the barest minimum.
Now, Nandom Wuyep tweet, say, may God empower our armed forces and other security agencies, their families, and bless our great nation, Nigeria.
Alhaji Musa Mohammed Hadijia, Buhari administration has done well on war against insurgency, though there is a foreign conspiracy and support of unpatriotic Nigerians on denying the report any incidents that jeopardize the security situation in the area.
All right. Tele Jack Solomon tweet says Nigerian military needs new lines, as it were, to completely exterminate the insurgencies. Some soldiers have been in operation for as long as 3 years, and some of them exhibited fatigue occasioned by prolonged absence from their families and loved ones.
Okay, now Lord Alpha C, the war embarked upon by this administration against insurgency has not yet been totally won, but ongoing, because bandits and insurgents still will lay some parts of the country. It at will and waste lives and property.
Mutana Farouk once again says the indefatigable efforts of the security personnel, their efforts are worth commending.
Keju Olabaju, the war against Boko Haram is too long and is consuming resources. We have advocated that intelligence gathering must be scaled up to weaken the terrorists.
Abubakar Mohammed, the Buhari administration has done well in the fight against insurgency, especially in the northeast.
Diana Abiodu, he really tried, and he has done so much in the fight against Boko Haram.
Now, Professor Sakimboyewa tweets, says before President Buhari came to power, Boko Haram expanded its territories, but right now our military have dismantled the terrorist group and recaptured those territories and neutralized many of their members.
Comrade Alhaji Ngala, before the coming of President Buhari into government, the people of Borno were sleeping with one eye open, but now you can move freely in Maiduguri. You can even go to farm.
Okay, yeah, that's right. We have some other tweets from Ibrahim Bello, Ibrahim Aji, Idris Yunusa. We thank you for sending in your tweets. On that note, we also would like to express our deep thanks to our 4 guests with us in the studios this morning. Major General Lucky Rabo, who is now Chief of Defense Trading and Operations at Defense Headquarters. At some time, he was the commander of the Multinational Joint Task Force and also head of the operations at the epicenter of the war against insurgents in the Northeast. General Rabo, pleasure having you today, and thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr.
We also would like to thank DCP Frank Umba, his Force Public Relations Officer. Thank you very much for contributing to our discussion on the war against insurgency, and most especially also for that advisory on what rape victims should do. And that's a topic that, of course, will engage us in some time in the future. Frank Umba, thank you very much for being around.
It's always a pleasure.
Here in the studios, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, our regular analyst and security expert. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
From Jos, we were joined by General John Temlong. General John Temlong, thank you very much, always shooting from the hips. Thank you very much for your contribution. We hope to have you again some other time when we return to security issues. Okay, so that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for tuning in. The program returns tomorrow, same time as always, 7 o'clock.